Welcome to Hashtag Trending on the Weekend. My guest is Steven Karan, and he is I'm going to check this out, make sure I get it right. You're the Vice President of AI and Data with Capgemini. Did I get that correct?
That is correct, Jim. I'm happy to be back, and my role is as the vice president of data, AI, and insights here at Capgemini Canada. And it's
Right.
great to be joining you on such a lovely day. Such a lovely.
It is fabulous, and it's nice to catch up. Um, we've talked in the past. So I know you, but my listeners may not. Can you just tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do at Capgemini?
Yeah, absolutely. So Capgemini, we are a technology services company. We are headquartered in France with deep roots in Canada, dating back 25 plus years. And what we do and what I do is fundamentally help Canadian clients and businesses coast to coast on their transformations of data, AI, and analytics. And really, that's really just focused on driving kind of more value and more business outcomes with this ever expanding and ever evolving set of tools that are becoming available in the market.
Yeah. And as I've said, I get actually I've been sort of swamped with interview requests lately, but this came across my desk first of all. Julie, who I knew people at Capgemini. My
Right.
roots go back to Ernst and Young prior to the Capgemini days there.
Right.
Uh, but uh, what captured me was you share an opinion with me, and that is that we are in a really what I'm going to call a pivotal point
Mhm.
with AI as a nation. And there's a lot. The decisions we're going to make now are
Mhm.
going to affect our future for the next, I don't know how many years. Personally, I
Yeah.
think we're at one of those technology pivot points where everything changes. I think it's going to be
Yeah.
bigger than what we thought of as the internet or what we thought of as cloud. I think
Yes.
this changes not only our technology landscape but our lives. And so
Yes.
there's a lot at stake, well, for us as a nation. And I've
Absolutely.
been troubled by that as well. Can you tell me what your perspective is, first of all, just so we can sort of open up the discussion?
Yeah. My perspective is probably one that's, it's pragmatic, certainly. And it's certainly a perspective I think that's grounded on Canadian values. And, my overall perspective is that as a nation today, competing in a global kind of economy with global players, both private and public in the world of I do think that we are behind. And I believe we're behind in terms of the investments that we're making to enable an AI driven kind of economy. I think we're also behind in investments that we're making in terms of people, education, as well as institutions to ensure that those institutions and educational institutions are ready for this evolving set of tools and technologies that are quickly, rapidly evolving. And I am disappointed because Capgemini, we're a global organization, and through conversations I have with my colleagues globally, I know that there is significant amounts of innovation and investment happening globally. And clearly, what we're seeing is dynamics of certain regions being focused in certain aspects of AI, right? So, for example, clearly a huge infrastructure push in the US in terms of driving a lot of AI infrastructure, which is going to be critical to AI sovereignty in the future, right? And in Europe, you have a lot of great innovation around how do you make AI secure, govern it, have the right guardrails in place, have the right protections for citizens and for the labor force as well. So some really good innovation there. And then in the Asia Pac regions, you have pockets of really deep innovation when it comes to AI products and AI platforms as well happening there. So it feels like as a nation, what we haven't yet figured out is kind of our AI brand in that global world, in that global kind of ecosystem. And my perspective is that we have a golden opportunity to, anchor that brand around our values and who we are as a nation. And that brand, I think, in my perspective, is one that really should focus on AI talent, right? AI talent, both in terms of developing talents locally and attracting the best talent globally into our fine country. And, I'm fortunate enough to be in a role where I hear probably on average somewhere between 3 to 5 times a week, Jim, from somebody somewhere around the world who wants to, make a relocation to Canada. Now that could be for, educational reasons. It could be for economic reasons. It could be for stability reasons. It could be for the fact that they want to try an authentic female bacon sandwich. I don't know, but I do hear from them 3 to 5 times a week. And so I know that desire to kind of come to Canada is there for many talented people across the world. And I think we as an organization, sorry, we as a nation, really have the opportunity to attract some leading and impressive individuals in this space, if that's what we want to do collectively.
It's really a crime, and we can get into more of this in terms of the corporate piece of this, but this is really a crime is the only way I can
Yes.
describe it. We contributed so much as a nation to the development of AI.
Mhm.
There's a reason why Jeffrey Hinton was here. There's a
Exactly.
reason why he could tenaciously go through what they called the AI winter, the type of patience that we
Mhm.
once had with investing in
Yes.
pure research in our universities. And there's a reason why Ilya Sutskever and many of the
Mhm.
others who went on to start AI companies that are now global in scale and gigantic
Yes.
started their apprenticeship here. We
Yes.
still have those universities, the University of Toronto, the University of Waterloo, Calgary, and I
Mhm.
believe McGill, and if
Yes.
I've left someone off, that's my own ignorance and I apologize for it. But we still have this incredible talent pool and ability, and yet we seem to have just sputtered.
It's so true. I'm completely with you. It's a shame what we've done in terms of not being able to institutionalize, capitalize, and really take economic advantage of that immense talent, that amount of funding and investment that's been made over several decades. And we are truly talking about decades here. But what gives me hope, Jim, is that all those impressive individuals in those impressive institutions are still here, right? Many of them are still here, and they're still doing deep research. They would love to have, support from layers of government to ensure that that research can be capitalized and commercialized and made for, the economic benefit of Canada. And that kind of infrastructure or apparatus to really take advantage of the tremendous research that's happening right now and really kind of ingrain that into, the economy, that's missing. That apparatus is missing. And so in some ways, maybe it's as a result of there's so much going on in the world, right? So much going on in the world, and sometimes it may seem like this is a sort of a trivial piece, but my perspective is it's going back to the way you started our conversation. The decisions that we're going to make over the next 1 to 3 years will have an impact on Canadian economy over the next 20 to 30 years, right? That's truly where we are in terms of the inflection point with this technology and how it's evolving and growing. And so I do hope it acts as a bit of a wake up call to say we do need to get organized and get aligned as a nation around where we want to focus and be able to support the individuals across institutions and private sector that are doing some immensely important work in this space at the moment.
Yeah, and I'm going to postulate that I think the postulate. I'm using big words today. This is good. My vocabulary is not leaving me.
But
I'm going to communicate my idea that I think that why we're at this pivot point,
Mm,
and that is that very little after the next decade you can it's like when we talked about cloud. Everybody said the
mhm.
cloud would come in X
Yeah.
years. I don't know what X is, but I know it's coming. And I feel the same way about AI.
Yes.
It's coming. It's unstoppable in X years, and that could be
Yes.
one. It could. Nobody knows. We're moving so fast right now.
Yes.
I've never seen technology move this quickly. I think
Yeah.
we move decades in years,
Mhm.
and so if we take that as our stable point, and we look at
Yes.
countries like China,
Yes.
where factories are automated. People have this crazed idea that
Mm.
somehow it's just a lot of they're still in that old labor market where they have a lot of cheap
Right.
labor. They have a lot of engineers. They have some of the
Mhm.
finest engineers in the world, and they're running lights out factories. And
Absolutely.
and those will be run by AI. And in many cases, I mean, I think we're going to struggle culturally about these things, but many jobs are going to be done by AI.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so if AI creates the wealth of that we would normally have from our digital economy, and we
Yes.
don't have the power to control that, where do we get
Yes.
our wealth from?
That's absolutely it. That's absolutely it. We just had some research that was rolled out by our Capgemini Research Institute, and we estimate that over the next decade, the economic value of just the latest innovation of AI, which is what we're calling agentic AI, is expected to drive 450 billion, like economic value globally. And are we in Canada in a position today to, take our kind of fair share of that economic pie? Not really. Like there's some gaps that we have. Now that's not to say, there isn't really good pockets of innovation happening with AI, generative AI and agentic AI in Canada. I see it personally within the telco space. I've seen it within the banking space and sector in Canada as well as pockets of the retail sector as well. So it exists in pockets, but not at the same level of mass that sort of adoption that we're seeing in other regions, be it Asia Pac or in the US and even actually in Europe where we lag behind. But what we do see every time, we do this survey and we do we cast quite a wide net. We typically survey somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500 to 2,000 executives globally around the use of AI. And every year we do this survey, we see the needle, not incrementally shifting, but shifting in sort of, key steps, right? So last year, for example, if we were to ask the question, are you as an organization piloting with agentic AI today? The response would have come back from about 10% of those executives that yes, we're piloting, but most would have been in that sort of planning phase or exploration phase, kind of maybe even strategy kind of phase. Today, if you ask that same question to those executives 24 months later, are you piloting any initiatives with agentic AI? About a quarter of them, roughly about 25% are now planning and piloting with that technology. And we have 2% that are actually doing it at scale. Now, 2% might seem like a very small number, but that was up from 0% that were at scale last year. And my sense is when we do this survey again in 2026, we're going to have somewhere between 5 to 7%, or maybe even 5 to, at a top end, 10% at scale. So we see it, that step up in terms of adoption happening, but the step up in terms of adoption is not happening in Canada. That adoption wave in Canada is significantly more of a cautious wave, and we're taking a little bit more of kind of baby steps. Again, caveats there being that there are some really good examples in this country of organizations that have kind of figured it out and have had the right sort of framework around AI enablement in place today. And those are the organizations that are really going to be in the driver's seat and taking that kind of fair share of that economic value that's being driven by this technology. And then there's others that are still, for example, not yet in the exploration mode, that are falling behind the curve and then are at a danger at certainly slipping behind their peers in their industries in terms of this adoption and in terms of the value, the economic value that technology is going to provide.
Yeah, and you've said an important thing: at scale. And
Yes.
that's the winners are going to be the people who can operate at scale.
Yes.
Having a great experimental little culture where you've got something happening in a
Yeah.
great factory in Brampton is doing something really great that's a wonderful thing for that.
Mhm.
But you've got to scale. And my
That's
fear
right.
is that we're not going to adopt as a nation. I've seen it with fintech, and I
Yes.
think open banking any day now.
Yes. That's not a problem.
I've seen it with fintech where we develop companies that can't
Hmm.
sell things in Canada because
Yes.
there's no industrial adoption at
Yeah.
scale. Therefore, we've got great fintech companies in Vancouver that are selling
Yes.
stuff to Australia, the US,
Yep.
everywhere else but Canada. And that
Hmm.
could be, even though we have great ideas here, they tend to leave, they tend to go where they
Yes.
can scale, or they become
Yeah.
exporters, and if we're lucky in there.
Yes.
So how do we get past that?
For sure. So scale really there's three dimensions to scale, right? There's capital that's required to scale. There's technology and infrastructure that's required to scale. And then there's talent and labor that's required to scale, right? So scale really does come from three different dimensions. And so, when you look at those dimensions of scaling, the one that I continually, get questions about, and there's sort of a mainstream sort of opinion about is we in this country lack the talent to scale. And my response to that is no. Like we don't lack the talent in this country to scale. What we lack is investment on that talent to scale, right? It's not a talent deficiency that we have, it's an investment deficiency that we have, right? But let's assume for a minute that we, get our sort of, act together and we can, address that investment gap, right? Then do we have the capital? Do we have the technology infrastructure, right? So I think we're making moves across both of those dimensions. There was some great, announcements recently by TELUS, who's going to take the leadership role in terms of a sovereign AI infrastructure in this country, which is critical. I think be able to have AI both in terms of inference and compute being able to be managed within Canada, within the boundaries of our nation. I think it addresses a lot of the concerns that many organizations have, and also will address the concerns that some of our regulators for regulated industries have in terms of the flow of the data and where some of the outputs are being derived from, right? So that's going to be critical. So we're going to make these moves in terms of AI infrastructure, and clearly Bell, with its recent announcements, are looking to ensure that infrastructure is really distributed across the nation as well. So I believe we're going to be able to get where we need to from an AI infrastructure perspective. And let's not forget, we already have great companies in Canada, the likes of, for example, Cohere, that are doing everything that they can do to make sure that the AI platforms that are being built in Canada are able to help scale the use and the adoption of generative AI, and agentic AI in different industries and different use cases as well. So I believe we're well on our way to solving, the infrastructure conundrum of scale. And I believe from a capital perspective, this is where currently there's a gap, right? The reason you mentioned we have so many of the fintechs looking elsewhere is that they couldn't get access to capital in the way that they needed to for scale. And I believe this is a role where really the federal government has a key role to play in order to ensure that that capital is being made available for this type of innovation, is being sometimes prioritized for this type of innovation as well, and fairly distributed across the nation as well. So I think that's the piece we need to figure out. I think we need to get together and really figure out what our brand is as a nation from an AI perspective, and then attach the funding and the investments to that brand as well. And we haven't figured that out at the moment. So I do worry that if we don't get our act together soon, and I'm talking months, not in years, but really months at this stage, then we're just going to have a repeat cycle of the fintech innovation, the cloud innovation, where we have great companies that start here, great startups that start here, that eventually then have to look elsewhere for the capital investments. Because I can tell you, again, it's not a talent issue. It's really not a technology issue. What we have right now is an investment issue.
Yeah, and I wrote I have the temerity to say I wrote a letter to Carney myself to say that I think one of the crimes that we have in this country is that we don't get our government act together.
Mm-hmm.
If the governments of this country would guarantee that they would purchase AI services
Yes.
from a sovereign AI developed both in private capital and with our current utilities and maybe public sector,
Yes.
we could attract so much. We have a grid that is 87% green. We have the capacity to develop way more energy than we can use to drive what? How about data centers?
Right.
And so this just drives me crazy. I see other countries,
Yeah.
like in France, OVH is a very, very good partner in the Canadian economy. OVH is a company, I'm not doing a commercial for, I get nothing from them. I just see them operating here, and they build and they contribute to the nation, and they're building data centers. We need to become that place where private capital from Canada can develop data centers. And it makes me crazy that we're not doing that.
And it's making you crazy because, as you pointed out, you're seeing other jurisdictions do that, right? And do that at scale, right? They are truly doing it on scale. Everything, in terms of what's happening in Europe, investments that China is making, Project Stargate south of the border as well. Clearly, this is something that other governments have recognized, right? In terms of the importance to invest in this technology, invest in companies that are innovating in this space as well. And we just seem to be, I guess, to use a bit of a cliche term, but we seem to be a little bit of a rudderless ship right now, navigating the AI waters, just hoping to kind of, hoping that the current kind of takes us to the right destination. But we can't take that approach. We have to be more in control of the ship and kind of guide ourselves to a North Star of our choosing. Because if we don't, my sense is that we're going to end up in a position where we are not a first world, nation when it comes to an AI driven economy. We are a second world, nation in that space. And that's not a space that we want to be in, because then clearly we're going to have, a lot of problems keeping up with how AI is driving other economies and other jurisdictions around the world.
Yeah, I think we will miss a great chance.
Yeah.
Again, I just look at this and I say, is
Yeah.
nobody looking
Yeah.
at this? And maybe, and I'm not being political about this. I
Yeah.
would like any prime minister. I happen to think that Mr. Carney,
Mm.
coming from his own investment
Yes.
background, understanding
Yes.
economics, which is a great
Yes.
thing in this point
Yeah.
time to understand, would understand that the United States is
Yeah.
going to not be able to generate enough power to run the data centers they need.
Absolutely.
We have a
Absolutely.
willing customer. We don't have to take them building data centers
Yeah.
here. We have
Yes.
a willing customer for data
Yes.
cycles that we could develop here. I even had
Yes.
the craziness to say,
Yeah.
we could be developing our own chips.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
we have we've had AMD did
Yes.
a great pile of development here. So it's
That's
not
right.
that we don't have that. So we don't admire the problem. If you had a magic wand,
Yes.
and I'm going to give you that for the sake of this podcast,
Yeah.
what would you do?
It's a very good question. So if I had a magic wand, what I would do is make artificial intelligence a national priority, right? We are currently rallying around as a nation in terms of a new economic framework with our largest training partner, right? That same degree of urgency, we need to establish AI as a national priority and put in place very quickly an overall strategic point of view around Canada's role in an AI-driven economy, right? Who do we want to be? What do we want to focus on? Where do we want to invest, right? And I think there are some, as you mentioned, low-hanging fruit in terms of just great, economic decisions that we can make with relatively, minimal, time lapse around data centers, around AI infrastructure, as well as what I've mentioned in the past, AI talent that we can quickly, put some very strong investment programs and funding against. And so I think if we make it a priority, establish what that North Star is for Canada in the world of AI and the economic world of AI, and maybe establish kind of three focus areas around the investments that are needed, the capital apparatus that needs to be there to allocate those investments, where we're going to focus on from a talent perspective, developing and attracting the best talent from around the world to come here because they do absolutely want to come here to innovate. And third is around making sure we pick a couple of key bets in terms of where in that AI stack of technologies we want to focus on, be it at infrastructure level, platform level, or product level, and then create a bit of an ecosystem of innovation and encourage further innovation in that space. We can quickly catch up because yes, there's one or two jurisdictions that are maybe 24 months ahead of us, but a lot of the world right now is not too far ahead. We're talking about like 6 months ahead in terms of that overall cycle of planning. And I do believe we have the opportunity to catch up if we can rally behind it and be focused as a nation.
Yeah. And if we did it for purpose,
Yes.
and this is one of the things that here's just my crazed
Yes.
ideas on this is, I personally, I believe Canada should become a leader in open source AI. And
Yes.
the
I'm with you.
reason I believe that is because it goes to our national character. We're
Yes.
collaborative,
Hmm.
you know, and my vision was just take healthcare, just one
Hmm.
area, healthcare, and there are many others.
Yes.
We have a captive healthcare system. Unlike many other nations, we can basically, if you said we're going to get past our provincialism, we're going to
Yes.
design AI applications for healthcare better than anybody else in the entire
Yes.
world, pivot our
Yes.
universities towards this, and be able to develop those. We
Yes.
could have, we could be the source of healthcare, and we might solve a problem that we're going to
Yep.
have, which is that we don't have enough healthcare professionals, and that's going to get worse and worse. But those are
I'm
the
with
types of things where I think if we had a national
you.
strategy,
Yes.
we could be involved in this. And I
You know
wish
what?
we would also, as a government, involve the
Yeah.
private sector. Firms
That's it.
like yours, and I'm not doing a commercial for you, but I came out of EY and
Yes.
Capgemini and those
Yes.
firms. There are
Hmm.
some very, very smart people
Yes.
working in these firms and who would love to contribute
Yes.
to the economic future of Canada.
And I'm so happy you said what you've done, what you have, which is, around the open source nature of Canada being a collaborative ecosystem around AI. I think it's critical. Like one of the key data points, the most surprising data point, I think maybe for, just a Main Street audience would be the trust in autonomous agents, right? The inherent trust in autonomous agents year over year, as we've done the survey, it's dropped from 43% to 27%, right? So why is that happening? It's because, as this technology is maturing, there is a stronger understanding of some of the risks, some of the ethical concerns, as well as just technology and, reputational risk that using this technology can potentially expose, right? And so the ability for an organization to have like the right kind of framework and tooling that enables, the safe use of agentic AI is going to be critical. So if we, take your focus and your idea around really becoming a champion for open source AI technologies, I think that's so important. And there's organizations like a Hugging Face, for example, that would love to work with a nation that is focused on open source AI because that's their mandate, and that would potentially attract a bit of a synergy in terms of investments. And if we can bring that forward and say, let us also help then solve this very real challenge that exists today when it comes to scaling this technology around trust, around transparency, observability, and really ensure that the outcomes that these autonomous agents are driving towards are ones that are ultimately based on accurate and fair representation of data of the population, critical for our use cases in banking, in healthcare, in retail. And I believe that is a golden opportunity for us because today there is no nation that is really the vanguard for open source AI. Open source AI's vanguards today are private institutions, right? Private organizations like a Hugging Face. And I believe, a country like us, we're just, as you said, so collaborative. We're friendly people. And I think, those values coming together, driving and championing open source can truly work in our favor.
Yeah, and I want to pull something out of what you said
Yeah.
because I think it's an idea. uh, It addresses the doomers out there, and I call
Mm.
them the doomers. And I don't calling people names is not good,
Yes.
but I just to put them into a category of saying
Yes.
those people who say AI is not ready yet. We have to
Mm.
wait until it's there. You know, we had this with privacy in Ontario. We had
Yes.
a privacy czar,
Mm.
Anne Kavokian, who
Yes.
brought us the uh, was it what do we call it by design was privacy by design.
Mm.
And if you went to Anne and said, this privacy stuff is holding us back, she'd rip you a new one intellectually. And she would say, you know something? I don't accept that excuse.
Right. Right.
That safety, security, doing
Yeah.
things well is not
Yeah.
it not getting in the way of progress. And I think we
Yeah.
sometimes hide behind that as if we're waiting for the world to say,
Mm.
okay, when agents are perfect, we'll use them. Um, what technology have we ever
Yeah.
implemented over the
Right.
past 50 years that we waited till it was actually even ready?
Right.
None,
Yeah.
but we seem to
Yeah.
be taking this double standard with AI. And it
Yeah.
just, this, which is if there's a million things that go wrong, right? And one thing that goes wrong, well,
Yeah.
AI, we can't use AI. And yet, and I've used the example, if you watch people and you say, well, AI will make a mistake. Let's go back to medicine.
Mm.
I'm gonna run a million X-rays. I can do that in 2 hours using
Mm.
AI, as opposed to 2 decades using
Yep.
people. And I'm gonna make one mistake in there. Well, my gosh, we
Yeah.
better not use AI for that. And
Mm.
yet, if you used the most talented people in the world and
Yeah.
took all the time, they would make
Yep.
mistakes.
Yep.
And
Yep.
statistically, we could study this and say, what's better? But we
Yeah.
don't. We just go,
Yeah.
well, you can't use AI till it's perfect. This makes
Yeah.
me, a lot of it's making me crazy. This is making me crazier.
Well, you know what? There's a way to solve that problem, right? And it's really around human in the loop, or something that we at Capgemini call that human and AI chemistry, right? What we've seen across the country is the organizations that have figured this out and have figured out how to really enable AI at an enterprise level at scale, right? They have an AI kind of enablement framework, and that framework really looks at making sure, for example, business outcomes are connected to AI outcomes, right? So that there's not just innovation for the sake of innovation, but innovation with a purpose, right? Really aligned to kind of key business outcomes that are trying to be solved for. Secondly, in terms of that framework, is like that technology foundation, right? The data readiness, the scalable compute, having a bit of a decision tree around what products am I going to buy in terms of AI products versus which ones should I invest in developing myself so that I have IP, or I have an ability to do a differentiated customer experience because I'm not using something off the shelf, right? That's there. And what also is there is around a talent framework, right? Because when it comes to this AI, proof of concept death valley that we see many organizations sort of, sputtering, the reason they're not able to get out of that death valley is not due to actually technology limitations. It's not the technology that's preventing them from scaling back out. It's the human limitations, right? And that human limitation is everything that you would expect, which is, do we have the right skills as an organization to actually execute this at an enterprise level? Do we acquire those skills? Do we partner to gain those skills, whatever it may be? But fundamentally, it's also around making sure that as you use this technology, there's a willingness to adopt different ways of service delivery or different ways of operating in an organization. And we see time and time again, organizations that have that history of being able to experiment, innovate, fail, learn from those failures, and then move forward are able to kind of get past that, that dreaded kind of death valley of AI POCs, because that human scaling is truly something that is a bit of a challenge. And connecting it back to this notion of like risk paralysis, like how do we actually move away from that? If you ask organizations today, and we have, right? Really, right now, there's about 1% of organizations that we've surveyed that are not interested in exploring any use case of the newest AI technologies, which is agentic AI, right? Now, most are in sort of this right now, this 60% are very much in this kind of, I'm going to explore, I'm going to like check it out, I'm going to do a little bit of maybe of a proof of concept around it to see how it works. And in that 60%, if you ask them the question, what would it take or what do you need in order to see an improved degree of trust in using this technology? 52% will tell you, I need to see demonstrated accuracy, demonstrated reliability of the outcomes, the predictions, the tasks that are being executed with this technology, with AI. And the second thing, about 45% will say, I want complete transparency and explanation in terms of the decisions and actions that these agents are taking, right? Like, so, open up the black box, show me exactly what's happening. And so for both elements of that, both of those, factors, there are ways and there are tools that allow you to have that observability to also be very much controlling the outcomes and the type of tasks that are going to be executed. So it's not again, a technology limitation, right? Sometimes it's going to be a leadership limitation that, pains me to say, but I do sometimes see that in pockets. But really today, I think what we have today, what we have as a country to do in order to get out of that analysis paralysis is, we need to develop these frameworks for these organizations to really come together and really look at learning from some early adopters and what's worked well, and learn from those successes, learn from those mistakes, and use that for their own customized AI enablement frameworks to really, work with this technology at scale.
Yeah, and you said two things that I pulled out of which outcomes and the way we think about this. And this
Yeah.
is why this is again something that it gets to me is we need to teach the skills. We're looking for a perfection and an understanding. And I think those are the right things to pursue. But I'll
Mhm.
give you my other example here is, you get 1,000 resumes that come in
Yes.
and yeah, I'm going to use AI to read those resumes. But people can say, well, it's going to have bias and it's going to
Mhm.
have mistakes. Well, guess what? People have biases and
Mhm.
people have mistakes. And I've talked about this only in using it for marking in universities. I said, people say, well, could you really use that for marketing in universities? Would you be fair? I've marked 300 papers at December when I taught,
Yes.
university. On the 299th paper, I have to tell you honestly, he didn't get the same or she didn't get the same attention as the
Mm.
first 10.
Mm.
So we're making these crazed comparisons
Right.
instead of saying, what are the outcomes we're looking for? And is this AI giving us these outcomes? And do we have the critical thinking? The person is not in the middle. The person is at the end with the critical knowledge and saying, does this feel right? Is
Mm.
this the outcome we want? And if not, let's follow up and find out why. I've been
Yes.
working with this for since ChatGPT came
Yeah.
out. I've been doing all kinds of stuff with it. I have never seen the amount of mistakes everybody says they see. I've seen
Right.
them,
Right.
but I've never also lost control of what I do with it to say,
Yes.
that doesn't look right. And I'm crazed enough to actually ask the AI, are you sure that's right?
Oh, absolutely. I am, 2 weeks ago, I was doing a bit of a deep dive with one of Anthropic's large language models, Claude. And I was doing some research into some trends and things of that nature. And then, there's a simple prompt that I asked at the end, which was really around, hey, I really need to see your source data. Can you link to the survey that you're quoting and that you're producing these outcomes against? And, the model then came back to me and said, hang on a second, I've actually made a mistake. While, I did reference the data correctly, in that previous question that you've asked me, in this question, extrapolated in a way that I shouldn't. I appreciate you, asking for the source data so that I can go back and correct my outcomes and my findings. And so it just is one sort of anecdotal example to say, these technologies have significantly evolved even over the last 12 months in terms of how they deal with hallucination, right? And how they deal with potentially biased outcomes. And the key is just to be an educated and informed user. And if you are an educated and informed user, both individually or, as a private institution, you can make sure you can use these technologies in a safe way. And again, going back to what you said previously, it's not a limitation, right? The risk factors that are with this technology, there's also risk factors with all technologies that we use. And I think if there's the right framework that organizations have in place to, protect themselves with the right guardrails, but also around how to work with this technology in terms of the types of use cases that are going to be used in the business to solve for with this capabilities. And equally important, what we're not going to be using this technology for. I think you can still very much, move quickly past that, risk analysis paralysis sort of phase and really start focusing on driving outcomes for your people, for your stakeholders, for your shareholders with this technology. And I would hate it to be seen as a roadblock because it is truly not a roadblock today. It's a speed bump that you just need to have a plan for.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Last question I want to ask you, because I
Yeah.
really want your vision on this,
Yeah.
is we know, I think we all accept, I don't know whether everybody really wants to talk
Mhm.
about it, but we know that AI may have its biggest impact on younger people entering the
Yeah.
marketplace.
Yeah.
There's lots of, when you look at it, the jobs that AI can do best
Yes.
are the ones that we cut our teeth on.
Yeah.
When I was a junior
Yep.
analyst, now I could be, what I could do as a junior analyst could be replaced with AI. It's
Right.
just not going to happen. So how do we
Yep.
start to think about what's the future for our young people
Yes.
to come forward? What should we be doing as parents and as citizens to help
Yes.
develop young people in this country?
So it's a great question. So let me answer that question in sort of that different ways or the different demographics of young people. So if there are parents who are listening to this and they're, wondering, how do I make sure that, my child is ready to kind of contribute in a very positive way economically once they've finished there's high school or postgraduate, or whatever it may be. I would say it's like really three things to me. Number one is, look for safe ways to expose your child to this technology today, safe ways to ensure that they're interacting with it. I have a 10-year-old daughter who is absolutely, a 10-year-old tech kid. She will do everything, anything, that we let her with technology. She's been programming 8-bit video games since she was about 4 or 5 years old. So she's just one of those individuals. And so we have figured out there's 2 or 3 different language models and vision models, image models that we find to be safe to produce the kind of the appropriate outputs that we let her explore and let her innovate with. Pretty soon, I'm going to be getting for her, and she doesn't know this, but I'll make sure she doesn't listen. But I'm going to be getting for her something called a Reachy Mini, which was recently introduced by Hugging Face, which is an AI enabled chatbot device. And it's something that looks at privacy at the core, where the data is local to your laptop. It's not going to be shared in a public cloud. And I'm going to, enable her with that tool to kind of experiment with this, right? So that's number one, safe exposure. Number two, for parents, help embed a love of learning. This technology is evolving so fast and so quickly that, what we focus on today, in the, let's say postgraduate or, post-secondary institutions may not be where we focus 10 years from now, right? So a love for learning and a love to kind of just explore new things and try new things is going to be key. And then I would say the third is critical thinking. Do not let AI remove the critical thinking development from your child's natural development life cycle. It very quickly can, particularly when you get to that, high school and even into that university phase where you're just relying on, an open AI or Claude to produce an essay for you. That's where some of that critical thinking is removed. So make sure that isn't removed and critical thinking remains, at the forefront. So that's for parents. Now let's go to, the group of very talented students that are now in our university ecosystems and are going to be hitting the labor market in the next, 1 to 2 years. I tell you, I just, hired a cohort of talented students from all of the major, universities in Canada, all of the great ones. And I would have loved to hire 2x or 3x the amount that I did. I truly would. I believe as a business, we could easily accommodate that. What was missing from the picture, though, was any degree of investment that is being made available to organizations like us that want to bring on more talented individuals, talented students. And, when we bring these individuals on, we take considerable amounts of effort, energy to develop these individuals with the right skills, both technology skills, as well as business skills, so that they can be productive members and can enable meaningful outcomes for our clients. So the fact that we know we could do that for 2 to 3x more of the population versus what we had as a cohort this year, I think is in a great way for us and other organizations like us to be able to kind of scale. So with the right investments coming from both the provincial and federal sector, I think we could do more and we could bring more talented individuals. So that's that kind of demographic. Let's say though, maybe for the final demographic, there's a cohort of individuals that are now finished their university and their postgraduate studies, and they're looking to make an impact in the labor market. They're just hitting the labor market right now. What can that demographic do? And I'd say for that demographic, there's an ability for them to really focus on learning how to use this technology. And you don't need to be someone who is a developer in order to use these technologies. What we find today is individuals that have that mix of both, sort of an acumen, both from a technology perspective and like a domain perspective, be it healthcare or retail or services or where it may be, and can bring those two things together and are able to effectively work with AI in order to, produce their, the outcomes that they need to. They're much more competitive, much more dynamic in the labor market. So for that cohort, my advice would be, please continue to explore how to use this technology. Don't shy away from it and use it as an ability for you to scale and actually become stronger versus others in the labor market in terms of those opportunities. And you're right, the nature of the entry level positions are going to be different, but I don't believe they're going to be disappear. And I think what it actually may allow for is a little bit of a step or a leapfrog in terms of that innovation that we're going to see in driving just different types of entry level roles versus the ones that historically existed in organizations 20 or 30 years ago. And I'll tell you in closing, Jim, there's so many talented students. I was so impressed with the cohort that we hired. They are much smarter than I was coming out of the university systems. They're much more dynamic and much more capable as well. And I have the utmost faith that we have all the talent at the university level in the world to be the best, to be super competitive in this market and in the world of an AI economy. And it brings me a lot of hope that we can actually move away or move out of this kind of little bit of a rudderless ship that we are at the moment, given the immense talent that we have in this nation.
Yeah. And I pick one thing out of what you said, and that was, giving kids and students the opportunities to use technology.
Yeah.
I just wish we'd stop focusing on the entertainment value and start
Yes.
focusing on the learning and the exploration value
Yes.
of
Yes.
technology. Because when
Yes.
you do that, you're not afraid to give technology to your kids. My daughter is she's one of
Yeah.
the world-class gamers in the world in terms of
Nice.
writing games.
Yeah.
She came to that, I don't know, she was 7 or we sent her to a programming course. Why not?
Mm,
Because it's a
mm.
good way to learn math, I thought. So and I want to leave people with that hopeful
Yeah.
piece. I don't want us to abandon this generation. I want us to take
Absolutely.
responsibility. Our legacy is going to be how well we bring this generation into its future.
Well said. I'm 100% with you.
Stephen, this has been a fabulous conversation. You mentioned some research reports. I'd like to make sure we draw attention to those. Can you make sure you send us a link to those, and we'll put those in
Absolutely.
the show notes when we broadcast this as well.
I would be delighted to. Thank you for giving us that opportunity, Jim.
This has been fantastic and great, and I hope to talk to you again soon when we can admire what our advice has done for the country.
Sounds like a plan, Jim. You take care and look forward to reconnecting with you.
Look forward to it too. My guest has been Steven Karan. He's the Vice President of AI Data and Analytics at Capgemini. Thanks for having coffee with me. And for all of those who've been listening to this, you probably listened to it on a weekend morning and you had other things you could have done with your time, and we're glad you joined us. I'm Jim Love. We'll talk to you next time.